Imagine buying, like, the most expensive gourmet food on the planet for a pet you absolutely adore.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. You bring it home, you place this beautiful ceramic plate right at their feet, and you step back, just fully expecting them to devour it.
And then they just look at you.
Exactly. You watch as they just stare blankly out the window, completely ignoring the feast while they, slowly starve. And you'd probably think, what a picky eater. Or maybe this brand of food is terrible.
Which is the natural human assumption, right? We blame the subject or we blame the product.
Yes, exactly. But what if the food is actually perfect? What if the problem is that you are serving food on the ground to an animal, like a giraffe, for example, that is biologically designed to only see food at the tops of trees?
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Thanks. Today, we are looking at a really bizarre biological blind spot hiding inside an everyday aquarium, and why the things in your life that seem, incredibly stubborn might actually just be structurally incapable of doing what you want.
I love this topic because it completely flips the script on how we manage, well, everything, from pets to projects. We always assume that if we provide the resources, the subject will just adapt to use them.
Right, like they should just figure it out.
Yeah, but biology often it refuses to compromise with our expectations.
And that friction, that clash between our expectations and biological reality is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. And our insights today come from a single, highly specific source.
Highly specific is almost an understatement here.
It really is. It's a journal-style blog post published on May 29th, 2026 by an aquarist named Ang. The title is Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 264, Why Guppies Won't Feed at the Bottom.
I mean, that title alone gives you a window into the author's mindset. Part 264 tells you this is someone who spends a profound amount of time quietly observing a very, very specific environment.
Yeah, that's dedication. And that is the mission of our deep dive today. We want to explore how close, systematic observation of our environments, even something as small as a literal fish tank, can reveal the hidden anatomical rules that govern behavior.
Right, it's about looking closer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to show you how a very simple shift in perspective can solve incredibly persistent problems, and how you can apply this exact kind of problem solving to the frustrations in your own life.
Because, the leap from diagnosing a fish tank to diagnosing a failing project at work is a lot shorter than you might think. Both require you to look past the surface level behavior and really understand the underlying mechanics of the system.
So true. So let's start with the setup, because before we can even get into the biology of these fish, we have to understand how Ang finally managed to see the problem clearly. In the post, Ang writes about keeping guppies for, quote, so many moons.
Which is a lovely way of saying a very long time.
Right. And that is a long time to do a daily chore. And when you do something every single day, you habituate to it. You stop actually seeing the process,
Right.
You drop the food in the water, you walk away, you assume the transaction is complete.
Habituation is really the enemy of observation. We develop this mental model of how a system works, and we stop checking to see if our model matches reality. You just assume the fish eat the food because, well, that is what fish are supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. But then Ang introduces a new tool into the tank that accidentally shatters that whole mental model. Ang starts using a mesh basket.
A mesh basket, okay.
Yeah, and according to the post, this mesh basket is crucial because it allows observation of the guppies feeding without the, quote, obstruction of aquatic plants.
Yeah. Let's pause on that for a second, because removing the obstruction of aquatic plants is a massive methodological shift.
How so?
Well, think about a normal aquarium. It's a complex, chaotic little world, right? You have plants swaying, you have water currents pushing things around, rocks, reflections on the glass. When you drop a handful of fish food in there, it scatters everywhere.
I used to have a fish tank. It goes everywhere.
Right. It gets trapped in leaves, it blows into corners. It is an environment just full of visual noise.
You literally can't track a single variable because there are 100 things happening at once. It's like trying to listen to a whisper in a crowded restaurant.
Which is exactly why the mesh basket is such a brilliant, if perhaps accidental, scientific tool. By feeding the fish inside this basket, Ang effectively isolated the variable.
Right, it contained the chaos.
Exactly. The basket stripped away the visual noise of the plants and the currents. It created this controlled environment with a clear line of sight. Subtraction is often the most powerful tool for diagnosis.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the reality that Ang observes in that clear, unobstructed basket is a total
It
revelation.
really is.
Ang drops the fish pellets in. Some of them float for a bit, but eventually they sink to the bottom of the basket. And Aang watches as the guppies go entirely crazy at the surface of the water, like highly active, feeding aggressively.
Oh.
But they completely ignore the pellets that sink to the bottom. They don't even acknowledge them. It's back to my giraffe analogy, right?
Mm.
It's like putting a plate of food on the floor for a giraffe. The delivery mechanism is fundamentally flawed.
What's fascinating here is that this observation forces Aang into a massive psychological pivot. In the blog post, Aang writes this incredibly important sentence. Quote, "I realize that guppies won't, or rather can't, feed at the bottom."
Wow. The jump from won't to can't. That changes the entire relationship between the caretaker and the subject, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shifts the problem from behavioral to structural. Won't implies a choice, you know?
Hmm.
It suggests the guppies are making this conscious, stubborn decision to reject the food.
Like they're just being divas.
Exactly. And when we think someone or something won't do something, our instinct is to force them, or to get frustrated, or to blame them for having a bad attitude.
But can't removes the blame entirely. If they literally cannot engage with the food down there, it means the structure you have built is failing them.
Yes, and in any kind of management, recognizing a can't situation is the very first step toward actual innovation. You stop trying to change the subject's behavior and you start redesigning the environment.
Okay, I have to challenge this premise, though, just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
We are talking about fish. They live in a three-dimensional aquatic environment. They swim up, they swim down, they dart all around. Wait, so are we saying they physically cannot look down, or they just heavily prefer not to?
It's a fair question.
Because it seems crazy. Are you seriously telling me they would rather starve than tilt their bodies 45 degrees to eat a highly nutritious pellet sitting like a few inches below them? That seems like a massive evolutionary glitch, not a structural can't.
I hear you, and it sounds like a glitch until you look at the economics of their biology. Aang points out that guppies are naturally engineered as surface to mid-level feeders.
Okay.
This isn't a personality quirk, it is a strict biological mandate. They possess what biologists actually call a superior mouth.
A superior mouth. Wait, which means it points upward, right? Like
Yeah.
they have an extreme underbite?
Functionally, yes. Their mouths are upturned, pointing towards the surface of the water. Now, to your point about them just swimming down to get the food, yes, a guppy is physically capable of swimming to the bottom. But imagine trying to eat soup off a flat plate using only a fork.
Oh, wow. That sounds awful.
Right. You could theoretically manage it if you expended an enormous amount of time and energy, but it is wildly inefficient.
It costs more calories to get the food than the food actually provides.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, evolution is an incredibly strict accountant when it comes to energy expenditure. Form always follows function. The guppy's anatomy is highly optimized for skimming the surface tension of the water for things like mosquito larvae. That upturned mouth is a specialized tool.
So they are literally built for one specific job.
Yes. And when an organism becomes highly specialized to do one thing perfectly, it usually becomes terrible at doing the opposite. Trying to scrape a round pellet off a flat piece of gravel with an upward-pointing mouth is biologically expensive and just mechanically awkward.
Okay, so the anatomy dictates the behavior. But Aang goes even further than just saying it's hard for them. Let me pull the exact quote for the notes here.
Yeah, read it.
Aang writes, "They can only look upwards for food, and they ignore sinking food once it hits the bottom." It implies a complete sensory disconnect. Like, once the food drops below their mid-level line, it ceases to exist.
You're touching on a really fascinating biological concept here called an Umwelt.
Umwelt.
Yeah, it's a German word. It refers to the self-centered, subjective world that an organism inhabits based entirely on its own sensory inputs.
Oh, like how a bat experiences the world mostly through echolocation, which is a reality we can't even comprehend.
Precisely. A guppy's welt, its cognitive map of the world, is sliced horizontally. Because their mouths point up, their visual processing and their predatory attention are heavily weighted toward the surface.
So they aren't even looking down.
No, because if a guppy spends its time scanning the gravel at the bottom, it is wasting its specialized anatomy, it is missing the insects floating above it, and it might be exposing its blind spots to predators. So the biological algorithm simply says, ignore the bottom.
The bottom is a blind spot. It just drops out of their reality. That is wild.
It is. When that sinking pellet hits the floor of the tank, the guppy isn't protesting the brand of food, and it isn't being stubborn. The pellet has simply exited the guppy's reality.
Wow. When you frame it like that, it makes you realize how often we do this in our own lives. We drop sinking pellets into the environments we manage, and then we get incredibly frustrated when nobody eats them.
Oh, all the time.
We provide a resource that makes perfect sense to us, the caretaker, but it completely violates the cognitive reality or the capacity of the person receiving it.
Absolutely. We design systems that require people to act against their own anatomy. And by anatomy, I mean their cognitive load, their working style, or even the actual tools they have available.
Like, imagine hiring a highly specialized, big-picture creative director, someone with a superior mouth, designed to skim the top layer of abstract ideas, and then forcing them to spend 80% of their week doing granular spreadsheet data entry.
And when they inevitably fail at the data entry, management says they won't do the work. They are being stubborn.
When the reality is you are feeding them at the bottom of the tank. Their working style is fundamentally incompatible with the delivery mechanism of the task. They can't process the resource you were giving them.
And that brings us to the crucial transition in Eng's blog post. Because understanding the biological limitation is fascinating theory, right? But Eng is running a real physical fish tank.
Right. Theory doesn't clean the tank.
Exactly. Rotting food at the bottom of an aquarium is not just an abstract concept. It is a critical danger.
Oh, for sure. Because if you leave that uneaten food down there, it breaks down. It spikes the ammonia levels. The visual noise we talked about earlier becomes actual toxic waste that can destroy the entire system.
It ruins the whole ecosystem.
So Eng has to move from observation to application. How do we fix the tank? And I was really excited to see the insightful, actionable advice Eng provides for fellow hobbyists.
Yeah, Eng offers two distinct actionable solutions, and they represent two very different levels of problem solving. The first is the most direct intervention by floating fish pellets.
Which is almost aggressively simple once you understand the biology. If you have a surface-feeding fish, give them surface-floating food. Match the resource to the anatomical reality of the user. Stop fighting the design.
It's the path of least resistance. You align your inputs with their natural capabilities. But as we know, the real world is rarely that simple.
Right, because sometimes you can't just change the resource. Eng acknowledges this. Maybe you have a massive, expensive tub of sinking pellets you don't want to just throw away. Or maybe you have a mixed community tank with different types of fish.
Yeah, you have constraints.
Exactly. So Eng offers a second, much more sophisticated solution for those sinking pellets. Eng suggests introducing, quote, bottom-feeding fishes or snails into your community tank.
And this is where Eng elevates from simply being a pet owner to acting as an ecosystem engineer. This is a profound shift in thinking.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to dive into this because it is my favorite part of the source material. Eng notes that these bottom feeders act as a cleanup crew to clear the unfinished pellets.
Right.
Let's think about this like a corporate hierarchy, or better yet, a tiny, self-contained apartment building where every resident has a highly specific ecological job.
A closed-loop system.
Yes. You have the Guppies. They are the executives in the penthouse suite. They have these specialized, superior mouths, and they are skimming the absolute premium resources right off the top. But inevitably, they are inefficient. They miss things.
Because no one is perfect.
Right. Pellets fall past them, slipping through the cracks and dropping down the elevator shaft to the basement.
And in a poorly designed system, those dropped pellets are classified as waste. And as we discussed, waste creates toxicity. The traditional management response would be to constantly intervene, to reach in with a net every single day and manually clean the gravel.
Which is stressful for the fish and honestly exhausting for the owner.
Very much so. But Eng says, don't intervene manually. Build a complementary system. Hire a basement crew. You bring in the snails.
The snails.
Their anatomical design, their biological algorithm, is entirely focused on the bottom of the tank. Their mouths are literally designed to sweep the floors.
It completely redefines the concept of waste. To the guppy, that sunken pellet is useless visual noise. It doesn't exist. But to the snail, that exact same pellet is a premium resource. It is a feast.
This raises an important question about how we view inefficiencies.
Yeah.
Eng took the primary friction point of the tank and turned it into the foundational food source for a completely new layer of life. That is the hallmark of advanced systems thinking. You stop looking at inefficiencies as things to be eradicated, and you start asking what other process could use this inefficiency as fuel.
That's brilliant.
By adding the snails, Eng created a perfectly closed loop. Instead of just throwing away the wrong food, the output of one biological limitation becomes the input for a different biological strength.
It takes all the pressure off the guppies to be something they aren't. You let the surface feeders feed at the surface, and you let the bottom feeders clean up the rest. It's such a brilliant, frictionless way to run a community.
And it highlights a critical flaw in how we often approach our own communities or workplaces. We tend to want everyone to be a generalist. We want every fish to eat whatever pellet we drop wherever it lands.
We want the creative director to also be the data analyst.
Exactly. But ecosystems don't thrive on homogeneity. They thrive on complementary specializations. The tank only achieves equilibrium when the biological biases of the different species balance each other out.
Which brings us to the end of the post. Aang signs off by casually calling this, quote, definitely one of those insightful days. And it truly is a masterclass in seeing the world clearly, hidden inside a 200-word blog post about fish food.
It really demonstrates the scientific method in its purest form, applied to daily life. Observe the anomaly, hypothesize the structural cause, research the underlying mechanics, and implement a systemic solution.
Let's pull all these threads together and recap the journey of this deep dive straight from Aang's insightful day. It all started with the power of unobscured observation. By placing that mesh basket into the tank, Aang stripped away the visual noise of the aquatic plants.
Right. Subtraction allowed for clarity.
And that clarity led to the crucial psychological pivot. Moving from the assumption that the guppies wouldn't eat the food to the realization that they physically can't eat the food.
Which then drove us into the biology of the superior mouth. We learned about anatomical optimization and the concept of the umwelt. The guppy isn't being stubborn. Its upward-pointing mouth literally restricts its perception of reality.
It's just highly specialized to skim the surface, making it blind to the resources sinking below it.
Exactly. And finally, we explored the practical application of this knowledge through ecosystem engineering. You either match the environment to the user by buying floating pellets, or you build a complementary system by introducing bottom-feeding snails to transform the systemic waste into a valuable resource.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The core lesson here is about diagnosing the friction in your daily life. Think about the people you manage, the tools you use, or even the habits you are trying to build.
Yeah, it applies to everything.
It really does. When something isn't working, when a process is failing despite your best efforts to provide resources, it is so easy to fall into the trap of frustration. It is easy to assume stubbornness.
But you might just be serving a gourmet meal on the floor to a giraffe.
Exactly. You might be dropping sinking pellets into a tank of surface feeders. Before you blame the subject, take a moment to introduce your own mesh basket. Strip away the noise. Observe the actual structural anatomy of your problem.
Are you asking someone to operate outside their cognitive umwelt?
Right. When you stop fighting the biological or structural reality of your environment and start designing for it, you can find incredibly simple, elegant solutions.
It really challenges you to audit your own expectations. And that leads to a profound final thought to leave you with today. We spent this time dissecting how a guppy's entire perception of its environment, literally what it considers to be food and what it completely ignores, is entirely dictated by the upward angle of its mouth.
That invisible blind spot.
Right. Its biology creates a massive invisible blind spot. It makes you wonder, what unseen superior mouths do we possess as humans? What hidden cognitive biases, psychological frameworks, or biological limitations are quietly dictating the exact angle at which you view the world? And more importantly, what incredible opportunities, resources, or solutions are you completely ignoring right now simply because they happen to sink to the bottom of your reality?